Well, we're here today to interview Donald W. McMurchie as the 2007 inductee into our California Parks and Recreation Society District 2 Hall of Honor. And the committee of people that are here today is Dick Councilman. He's a former administrator from Fulton El Camino Recreation and Park District and retired as administrator from the Greater Vallejo Recreation District. Debbie Walker, who's retired Mission Oaks Recreation and Park District, Carmichael, California, District Administrator. And Gary Jewell, retired District Administrator from Sunrise Recreation and Park District. And I'm Judy Quatrin, and I'm retired as faculty from Sacramento State, the Recreation and Leisure Studies Department. We represent the Hall of Honor Committee from California Parks and Recreation Society. So we're here. We're very honored to be able to talk to you today, Donald. And you were selected as a recipient in the Legacy category of the Hall of Honor, and you were recognized because you have made significant leadership contributions towards the formation of historical benchmark projects, events, or programs within California Parks and Recreation Society District 2. And the purpose of our interview is to document and record your history so that other generations, other recreation professionals will be able to learn from your experiences, because you would be a wonderful mentor to anyone. So as we begin, we'd like you to tell your story.
Well, that's all very flattering, Judy. Thank you. I suppose we ought to start with the vital statistics. Born June 24, 1922, so I'm in my 94th year. When I was growing up, my father worked for the J.C. Penney Company, who had a policy of moving their employees every 2 or 3 years. So during my youth, I lived in Cavalier, North Dakota, Deadwood, South Dakota, Havre, Montana, Chinook, Montana, Kellogg, Idaho, and finally graduated from high school in Wenatchee, Washington. Then went on to college at Whitman College, a small liberal arts college in Walla Walla, Washington. In 1943, went into the service in the Army Air Force. Got out of the Air Force in 1946. Went to Stanford Law School, graduated in 1950. Came to Sacramento to work for a small law firm here. And then in 1952, Tom Files and I, who I had known at Stanford, started our own law firm known as Files and McMurchie. And that firm continues to exist in Sacramento under a different name. In fact, it's now one of the oldest law firms in Sacramento. So that's the vital statistics.
Okay. Would you like to continue on with your career path, or would you like us to?
Well, yeah, I think you've asked before how I got into the park and recreation business, and that's kind of an interesting story, so I'll tell that story. In 1952, we bought a subdivision home on Drayton Drive near the intersection of El Camino and Watt Avenue. That was then the verge, the end of suburban development in Sacramento County. In fact, the goat man was still herding his goats at the intersection of El Camino Avenue and Watt, which eventually became the Country Club Center shopping center. My neighbor was a man by the name of Guy Fairchild, who was an engineer for the Department of Water Resources. And one day he came over and said, I understand they're going to have a meeting at the Cotty School about forming a special district of some kind, and that's just going to increase our taxes, and I think we ought to go over and find out what's going on. And I said, yeah, well, I think that's probably a good idea. So we went to the meeting. Betty Forey was kind of in charge of it, and she had children who were a little bit older than ours. We were all just starting out. And she'd had some experience with baseballs through her windows of her house, and she thought we needed to have a park. And she'd already picked out the site, which was adjacent to the cottage school, had a little creek running through it, and was up for zoning at that time for apartment use. And she thought that if we were ever going to have a park, that we ought to get a district formed and get a hold of that property. And so by the time the meeting was over with, well, I had been drafted to prepare the petition for formation of the district. And after the district was formed, Guy Fairchild was elected to the board of directors, became the chairman of the board of directors of Fulton El Camino, and served as chairman for many years. So that's what happens when you go to a subdivision, special district formation meetings, yes.
Especially when you're an attorney. I'm
yes.
Sure, because everybody looks to you for your expertise. Yeah.
Well, I was drafted because I was an attorney.
Don, interject here. Were there any challenges to the formation of the district, as you saw?
Well, it developed that there was. The first thing the board did was hire a master planner, and that was Ken Anderson, who did the master plan for Fulton El Camino and for Cordova, did the park site plans, and actually was an instructor at Sacramento State. And the first thing he said was the guy who drafted this petition didn't adequately provide boundaries for the district, and the boundaries he did provide are too small to support a special district financially. And so the first thing you got to do is annex some territory. The original boundaries were Fulton El Camino, Marconi, Watt, and Arden, which was a nice little unit around Cottage Park, and I thought, you know, that would be fine. But we then annexed, extended the boundaries out Arden to the freeway, and then the freeway back to Marconi. And so that was the first annexation, and very advantageous because it contained the property which eventually became the Arden Fair Shopping Center, and also contained the property that Ken had identified for the community park of the district, which was on Howe Avenue. So that was the first challenge that we had, is the guy who drafted the petition didn't provide adequate territory for a viable agency.
That's good to know, historically. Other than that particular issue of needing to expand the boundaries, and I think you had a second annexation some years later,
Yeah.
what did you see was the biggest challenge for you as the attorney for?
Not really. I thought it was all very interesting and not particularly a challenge. Of course, the district had no facilities and no programs for the first few years, and so they asked me to continue with whatever needed to be done to represent the district, to write their letters and meet the people that needed to be met, and prepare agendas and minutes. And so I was the executive secretary of the district for the first few years of its existence. And then when they started construction on Cottage Park, they hired a full-time administrator. But I continued to go to the board meetings as legal counsel. In fact, I talked too much at board meetings, and I had been challenged as being a sixth director without a vote. So that's something lawyers aren't supposed to do, but that's something this lawyer couldn't avoid doing. So I had a lot of fun watching the district grow.
Who was the first administrator that they hired? Do you remember?
I think it was a man by the name of Robert Leedy, and they had a little office on Cottage Way. In fact, it was the home of the owner of the property that we had purchased Cottage Park from. And then the offices moved into the Cottage community building when it had been completed. And we had Wayne Bartholomew, who was an administrator for a while, who had quite a history, and I think he was with the state for a while and also an administrator in Stockton or someplace. And then in 62, was that when you came to the district?
64, I think.
64, okay. We were looking for a new administrator, and Betty Foray came up again. She had moved to Marin County and identified this young man that was working for Terra Linda Recreation and Park District as having some potential, and she recommended him to us. And so that's how we found Dick Councilman as the administrator, who really got to the district as it was just ready to roll and developed some great programs. And did the supervision of the construction at Howell Park, the community center at Howell Park. But no, everything, I can't think of any real challenges.
All right. Talking about the district expansion, it did some time back that moved the boundaries to the north more. There was a issue concerning a place called Bohemian Park. Did that bring up any story?
Oh yeah, that's I know you love this story. I kind of like this story too, and as a lawyer, it's an interesting story to tell. Well, Dick was the administrator when they expanded the boundaries further out the freeway to Watt Avenue and then back to the original boundaries, and that included a new territory that he had master planned and identified a park in the Bohemian Village as a future park for the district. Bohemian Village was built by a man by the name of Jerry Strizak, Jerestrizak, in 1946, right after World War II. In fact, one of the first subdivisions in this northern portion of Sacramento County. And it was located on the north side of Marconi between, generally, Howe and Watt Avenue, called Bohemian Village because he came from Czechoslovakia, which of course was Bohemia under old Austro-Hungarian Empire. But at one time, some residents of the Bohemian Village subdivision came to the board meeting and said, hey, we just got a notice that a guy by the name of Calvin is rezoning that property for apartment houses, and we thought it was supposed to be a park. And so we were pretty surprised about that, and of course I was given the job to find out what was going on, and I went to the title company and found out that Jerry Strizak, at the time of the formation of the subdivision, at the time of the beginning of the subdivision, had deeded this property to the Bohemian Village Homeowners Association. And at that later, Jerry Strizak had deeded the same property to his wife as part of a divorce settlement, and she had married Mr. Calvin, and she and Mr. Calvin were rezoning property that they thought they owned. And so we knew we needed to bring a lawsuit of some kind in order to demonstrate that Bohemian Village Homeowners Association was the true owner of the property. But we couldn't find a Bohemian Village homeowners association because either they'd all died off or moved out of the subdivision or something. And so we had to reconstitute the homeowners association, and the way to do that was to have the subdivider appoint some new members to the homeowners association. And Dick, councilman, was able to locate Jerry Strezek, who at that time was living back in Sacramento, and we met with him at the Sacramento Inn for lunch and explained our situation to him and asked him if he would appoint these people who we knew were interested in the park to the homeowners association, which he was very happy to do, get back at his wife a little bit as part of the divorce arrangements. So we reconstituted the homeowners association, filed lawsuit, established that the homeowners association was the owner of the property. And they held a meeting and decided that they had no way to raise the financing to develop the park, and the best thing for them to do was to deed it to the Fulton El Camino Recreation and Park District so that the Park District could develop it. And so instead of having to acquire Bohemian Park, it was gift deeded to the district. And that was a fun. Is that a good telling of the story?
Yeah, it's a good story. I don't remember the acreage, Don, of it, but or the price that we had to pay, but it was.
I don't think we paid anything for it.
No, just
What you mean? What we would have had to pay?
what we would have had to pay.
Yeah.
Plus our attorney fee.
Yeah. Yeah, other than the attorney fees, right? Yeah, that was substantial, as I recall.
Don, it's nice to talk about Fulton El Camino because those of us visiting with you today have some background there. But you did legal counsel work for some of the other districts. So.
Yeah, I think the next agency was the Cordova Recreation and Park District, and they had just had a committee that was interested in forming a district, and so they asked me to draft a petition again, which I was happy to do, but this time I had learned my lesson about district boundaries, and so I described extensive boundaries for that district, starting at Bradshaw and the river and going out Bradshaw to Jackson Highway, and along Jackson Highway to Grant Line Road, which nobody even heard of Grant Line Road in those days. And then Grant Line Road to Prairie City to the Antelope Creek, I think it is. Then Antelope Creek back to the river, which came in right at the Folsom Auto Mall. So those were substantial boundaries that are still being filled up by housing. And that district was formed and elected a board of directors and hired a man by the name of Paul Hagan as the first administrator, I believe. Paul was a football coach, I think, at Willows when the district hired him. I remember we were meeting in a small space at the Rancho Cordova School. This is the board of directors when we interviewed Paul, and so that was the very beginning. Paul had a very difficult administration. He had a very strong board of directors. Jim Mullaney was the president of the board, and Becky Lefevre was on the board, and they were micromanaging the district when he was trying to administer the district. But he was always able to maneuver his way through, and he actually served his whole career as the administrator at Cordova. And when he retired, he was so well respected that they named the community park for him. So a successful administrator of putting up with a very strong board. Whereas on the other hand, Dick Councilman was a very strong administrator with a very supportive board. So I had a little experience with both kinds of administrations.
Through the years, some things have happened for special districts that are very, very significant into their continuing to be a wonderful presentation to the community. As legal counsel, you were involved with two of them that I can think of. Could you talk a bit about Pardek and Capri? Was that trigger
Yeah, let me mention another district before I leave the districts, and that was the Southgate Recreation and Park District. When I first became involved with them, why they existed in a very small territory, Southgate subdivision, adjacent to what was then the Southgate Shopping Center on Florin Mall. And they ran into the same problem as Fulton El Camino had run into, and that is that they didn't have enough assessed value to really function as a district, so they wanted to get involved in an annexation. And they too drew extensive boundaries. I think they were bounded by the city of Sacramento on the north, and Cordova Park District at Jackson Highway, and Elk Grove District on the south, and I forget how far they went to the west, but that was a substantial expansion. So we learned our lesson there, and they're still filling in gaps in their territory. All of these districts, I'd forgotten this part of it, but a very important part of it, each of them had done extensive master planning, had prepared beautiful booklets showing the master plan and the development plans for each of the park, had gone to PTA meetings, had held coffee classes to promote their bond issues, and all of them were successful in getting bond issues, which obviously were crucial to the development of those agencies.
That's true. Okay, well,
But now you know what? Now you want to hear about Pardeck and Capri, huh?
two of the most successful endeavors.
Yeah, I do consider that one of the best accomplishments of my career as an attorney. I had, well, as a result of Dick Councilman's encouragement, I had begun to go to statewide conventions, particularly the convention of the California Association of Recreation and Park Districts, and became legal counsel and was attending their board meetings. And a woman by the name of Ann McKeeby was the insurance broker for the Rancho Simi Recreation and Park District, and some other Southern California agencies started coming to the board meeting of CARPD, and soon developed additional districts that she was the insurance broker for. And she was very strongly in favor of creating a pooled premium self-insured program for recreation and park districts so that they could pay their own claims and manage their own claims. And as a result of a lack of administration and a lack of sales staff and all the other things that an insurance company has to do, would be able to save some money for the districts as far as their workers' compensation premiums were concerned. At the time, public agencies were required to purchase their workers' compensation from the State Compensation Insurance Fund, and the State Compensation Insurance Fund was aware of the fact that they had a monopoly on public agencies and fixed premiums accordingly. And many districts are complaining about their claims management procedures and their lack of concern for the employees of the district. So a self-insured pool would be able to improve on both of those things by reducing premium and also by improving claims management. And so we formed a joint powers authority containing several recreation and park districts known as Park and Recreation District Employee Compensation, abbreviated as PARDEC. And that program got started, continued to expand membership, and was a very successful premium saving service for recreation and park districts in California. Later on, a time came when there was no insurance company that would provide liability insurance to recreation and park districts, which obviously was a super emergency as far as park districts were concerned. And so CARPD immediately asked me to form a liability pooled premium self-insurance program, which I did under the name of the California Association of Recreation and Park Districts, or CAPRI, and that has been a very successful program also in saving premiums and in ensuring source of coverage for the liability of recreation and park districts. I think, too, provided some wonderful programs for districts, both in safety and other concerns that districts had as a whole.
Well, you've had a lot of experience with our districts over a number of years, Don. Is there anything that stands out in your mind as a highlight that you haven't had a chance to talk about?
Well, I think Fulton El Camino was probably the highlight because I did participate there for quite a few years. I think another thing I might mention is the Save the American River Association. I think that came about in the 1960s as well. Sacramento County had hired a man by the name of William Pond, as director of the Department of Parks and Recreation. I think perhaps the first director in Sacramento County, and Bill was very energetic in forming county service areas, serving various areas of the county for the park services. And one day took a ride with an equestrian group along the American River. The equestrians had a horse trail along the American River for a long period of time. In fact, there was a Selby Ranch at the time located what's American River Drive and Watt Avenue now, and known as the Selby condominium complex. And it rented horses and had stables and was a real equestrian center. Anyway, Bill was impressed by the vegetation along the river and how beautiful it was, how fully grown it was, and immediately contemplated that as being an appropriate place for a park. A great vision, I always thought, and obviously the land was relatively inexpensive because it was inside the levees and it couldn't be built on anyway. I think there were a couple of enterprises in that area at the time that they probably had to condemn. Tykert had an operation at just off American River Drive, underneath the Watt Avenue Bridge, as a matter of fact. The Tykert building is now located on that property. And Erickson Sand and Gravel had a big operation at the end of Arden Way, which is now the William Pond Park. And the fishing piers there at William Pond Park are located on the ponds where Erickson had excavated the sand and the gravel. So those are the only two people that I recall as having any ownership interest inside the levees. So that was a great a great improvement, for a great recreation and park improvement for Sacramento County. And the agencies, Fulton El Camino and Cordova, have been contacted by Bill to create a interest group that would be able to speak in front of the Board of Supervisors, otherwise represent the creation of such a district, and it was known as the Save the American River Association. In fact, I found out the other day that I had filed the Articles of Incorporation for the Save the American River Association. Guy Fairchild and Jim Mulaney, the chairman of the two boards, are very active there, Dick as well. And FEA signed the Articles of Incorporation as the secretary of the association. So I've just mentioned a lot of names that are members of the Hall of Honor.
have provided so much information. I'm quite impressed because you don't have any notes there. It's all.
Well, you know, yeah, I have thought about it since you suggested that we do this. I suppose one other thing that I might.
Anyway, I think there were a couple of enterprises in that area at the time that they probably had to condemn. Tykert had an operation at just off American River Drive, underneath the Walt Avenue Bridge, as a matter of fact. The Tykert building is now located on that property. And Erickson Sand and Gravel had a big operation at the end of Arden Way, which is now the William Pond Park. And the fishing piers there at William Pond Park are located on the ponds where Erickson had excavated the sand and the gravel. So those are the only two people that I recall as having any ownership interest inside the levees. So that was a great a great improvement, for a great recreation and park improvement for Sacramento County. And the agencies, Fulton El Camino and Cordova, have been contacted by Bill to create a interest group that would be able to speak in front of the Board of Supervisors, and otherwise represent the creation of such a district, and it was known as the Save the American River Association. In fact, I found out the other day that I had filed the Articles of Incorporation for the Save the American River Association. Guy Fairchild and Jim Mulaney, the chairman of the two boards, are very active there, Dick as well. And FEA signed the Articles of Incorporation as the secretary of the association. So I've just mentioned a lot of names that are members of the Hall of Honor.
Well, you have provided so much information. I'm quite impressed because you don't have any notes there. It's all.
Well, you know, yeah.
Really impressed with that.
I have thought about it since you suggested that we do this. I suppose one other thing that I might, it's not a recreation park thing, except indirectly, and that's the California Special District Association, which was formed in order to represent all special districts in California, and now is.
Ready? Don, one of the more exciting things that stick out in your career, and I'd like you to talk a little about, was insurance for special districts and also for workers' comp.
Well, as I've talked about, I did form self-insurance programs, joint powers authorities for the California Association of Park and Recreation, California Association of Recreation and Park Districts. But I also formed a similar workers' compensation program and a liability joint powers program for the California Special District Association. Well, at some point in the 1970s, I think, a young man had a luncheon appointment with me. What was Dave's name? CSDA, first guy?
Nagler.
Dave Nagler, yeah, was the part-time administrator. It hadn't been appointed. As the part-time administrator of the new California Special District Association. He was a lobbyist, but he had taken this on as a part-time job, and we had lunch, and he said, you know, I understand that you have formed a joint powers authority for workers' compensation coverage for CARPD, and could you do the same thing for CSDA? And I said, sure. And he said, well, I understand that your JPA provides for setting aside 10% of the premium to go back to the forming association. And I said, yeah, well, that's what CARPD does. We can do that for CSDA. And he said, well, that's what I need. You see, that I need is some kind of a source of income to get this program going. So we did put together a workers' compensation program, and later put together a liability program for CSDA. And at one time, I was administering in my office all 4 programs as administrator of the agency. So that was a good part of my practice for a lot of years, just administrating the programs.
One of them was called Capri, the other one was called Pardeck. You remember that?
Pardeck, yeah, well, I did talk about
Yeah.
Pardeck, didn't I?
Yeah,
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 but-
you did.
But you didn't spell out Pardeck. I was kind of curious.
Oh, well, Pardeck was Park and Recreation District let's see. Park and Recreation District Employee Compensation.
There you go.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what it was.
yeah.
And it was the first JPA that I formed for California Association of Recreation and Park Districts.
Right.
And has been a very successful program. As has the Special District Program. Dave, you've got the figures on that. Didn't you say how many members they have now?
Well, the liability pool is now known as Special District Risk Management Authority. It absorbed the workers' compensation program, so they're all in now. The workers' compensation program has 585 special district members. The liability program has close to 600 special district members, and their total assets without debt is $100 million.
Wow.
See what you
From Little Acorns, Big Oak Scroll.
Yeah.
I must say that we didn't introduce David McMurchie,
My
who
ol-
is
my
an
oldest son.
attorney, and Dawn's oldest son, and he's here today to learn a lot about his dad that he doesn't know. But that is this part of your practice now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
Dave's carried on the Special
Right.
District.
I
Program.
actually administered the special district, the CSDA workers' comp program when Dad retired. I administered that for about 10 years until it merged with the liability pool. So.
okay, good. Well, then it's nice to have you here,
Thank you.
obviously. But yeah.
I just realized that I hadn't talked about my family. I left that out of the biography. Well, my wife was Doris Irene Winkleman of Olympia, Washington. I had met her because she was the sweetheart of Sigma Chi at Whitman College, and I had just finished my first year at Stanford, and I thought maybe I would be able to get a date with her. And I was successful in that, and married her the following summer after my second year of law school, and she worked to put me through my third year of law school, and we had 3 fine sons. The oldest one, David William, and Paul Bryan, and Stephen Scott. Both Dave and Steve live in Sacramento, which is a lovely thing for their father, and Paul is at Lake Tahoe. So, very, very nice, wonderful family.
Well, we've all knew Doris, and she was wonderful, wonderful woman, warm and welcoming, and a lovely, lovely lady.
Thank you.
Very nice.
She was that.
She was, yeah. Okay, we will go on then with some other questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah, those are the stories I had to tell.
all right, I think from what you've said, probably the contributions that you are most proud of in terms of your career would be the formation of these special park district organizations. And you seem very proud of Save the American River Association. That was certainly
Well, I am, because I'm still enjoying the Parkway and have for years. I'm very relatively close to it here, so it's always been easily accessible to me. And so I've always thought that was a particularly imaginative use of the flood acreage. And of course, is well known throughout the nation now for its novelty and beauty. So I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of the money that both special districts and recreation and park districts have been able to save through their insurance programs.
Well, those accomplishments are certainly the reason, or some of the reasons, why you were inducted into our Hall of Honor. Absolutely.
Good.
All right, Terry Jewell has a few questions that he would like to ask you.
One, Don, that I'd like to ask, and it's maybe down almost into the last category of questions, that allows you to kind of reflect on what it's been like to be part of districts and your passion, I think, for districts from way back when, starting up to now, is that people don't always have the luxury in their career to do something that they're passionate about. And from hearing you talk, you've had that luxury of. And I'd be curious to know what you believe districts, particularly park districts, have allowed California to experience without districts, and just relying on cities or counties or National Park Service or state park system. Districts fill a very valuable role, but from your perspective, how do you see districts making a difference?
While districts are so much more responsive to the needs and the interests of their citizens than are cities and counties. And so if you want a really representative government, you're going to find it in the special districts. And so I've been very supportive of them. I was for a while a legislative advocate for the California Association of Recreation and Park Districts, and I recall that one of the big problems that I had initially is that I would run into legislation which would say cities and counties may, and I would have to go to the legislator and say, well, there's another form of government agency in California called special districts, so would you amend that to say cities, counties, and special districts may? And so that was an educational program to show how little special districts were really acknowledged in California. And that's why I've been particularly proud of the California Special District Association and the position they've taken as the advocate for special districts, and recognized as such by the legislature, and now have a big legislative staff. How many have they got? Yeah, 5 people on their legislative staff in-house. So, yeah, a very special change in the recognition of special districts.
Outside of your practice with districts and providing them legal consultation, you've also done some volunteer things that kind of rounded out some of your life. Could you talk a little bit about those endeavors?
I don't know very many, actually. I suppose Save the American Rubber Association was one. At one time, I was on the board of directors of the California Junior Museum. Don't remember being active in.
Okay.
No, pretty busy in my practice, actually.
Okay. With people that are thinking about going into the park district career today, would you tell them something different than you would have, say, at the beginning of your career, if you had that same student?
Well, it's a different world now than it was when I was involved with it, because we were doing the exciting things. We were forming agencies, we were developing master plans, we were acquiring property, we were constructing facilities, we were developing programs, and all of that was very exciting and really fun to be a part of. And now most agencies are just maintaining what's already been prepared for them and programs that have already been developed for them. So it doesn't have the excitement that it had in our day. And it seems to me that's kind of happening in the Hall of Honor because, you know, we've recognized all of the people that were in the formative years, but we're seems to be having a harder time identifying current people for the Hall of Honor because there's no great accomplishment. It's kind of a maintaining role that they're doing. So it's a different world than it was for us.
Well, carrying that forward and looking out into the future, what are gonna be some of the bigger challenges that these park districts are gonna be faced with? Because they're gonna have to be some pretty talented people to even just to maintain, much less, because all that infrastructure is getting old, it's already old.
Finance is always the problem. And will continue to be. I might mention the Quimby Act, which was the park dedication law. I was active in the legislature at that time, representing CARPD, and helped draft the Quimby Act, which was a great savior for recreation or park district. I don't know how much money they've saved by having their park property dedicated rather than having to purchase it. Where was I going?
I guess the thing.
Financing, yeah.
Well, the challenge is gonna be
Yeah.
there,
Well,
just
I think
stay around.
Dave is involved in some of this. I know there's a special assessment process that what our agency is using now for their
Well,
financing.
it's the whole Prop 218 challenge. You know, you now need property owner approval to finance things. You needed votes in your day, though, to get financing, bond financing, in order to construct new facilities. So it's a similar challenge, I think.
Yeah, I think financing is the biggest challenge, as it has been since Prop 13. You know, it's just been a problem for agencies to raise enough money to keep themselves going.
Okay.
I'm curious about who might your a role model that you had. Who was your role model? Was there one as a young person who influenced you?
Well, I had a lot of people who influenced me. I thought about that since I thought you might ask that question. First one I think of is in high school. A teacher by the name of Maurice Powers, who was the scoutmaster of the troop I was in, and also the master of the Sea Scout program that I was in. And he was a great force in kind of building up my self-esteem. And then I had some great teachers at Whitman. Being a small school, the teachers were all very accessible, you know, drop in anytime, and not just to discuss your grades, but to discuss world events and other things that were on your mind. And a couple of teachers there, Chester Maxey was the political science instructor, had written a lot of books on political science, and that was my major. He was a big influence. A guy by the name of Walter Riley did contemporary governments, taught the course out of the newspaper because we were developing communism and fascism and all forms of, and democracy and all of the forms of government, so it was very easy to teach on the newspaper. Those people were influential for me.
Okay. What, if anything, would you have done differently in your life? That's a tough question. That's a hard one. Is there anything?
Well, I guess if I'd had a choice, I would have been a corporate attorney when I came out of law school. I always wanted to participate in the management of a company. And I wasn't able to get that kind of a job, but I kind of developed that kind of a job because working in special districts as I did, it really is helping them manage a company. It just happens to be a public company instead of a private company. So I realized my ambition by being able to represent them in the conduct of their business and their affairs. So that really was my goal, and that turned out to be accomplished.
Good. And one of the last questions that I think we all are interested in hearing is, what would you like people to remember about you?
Oh. I don't know. I guess that he was a happy guy. Lived a great life.
Well,
which is true.
You certainly have demonstrated that.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a wonderful family, you've had a wonderful career, but I've known you for 50 years,
That's right.
at least 50 years. And I can say, without a doubt, you've always been so positive and uplifting and happy person.
Well, that's,
And I think that's what we, in recreational parks, we need to be that. We never,
well, my father has been known as Good Time Charlie, and I think I may have got some genes from him.
oh, how cute. Well, is there anything that anybody would like to ask?
Well, it's just hard for me to imagine that districts would have advanced as much as they did without you.
Okay.
That's, sums it up as far as my listening in today. It just kind of reaffirmed all of that and added some more, so.
Yeah, one of my regrets is that I never got to represent dependent districts, two different kinds of districts in Sacramento County. I was forming independent districts that had an elected board of directors, so I was able to participate with them, but the county was forming county service areas, which became dependent districts, where the board of supervisors was the board of directors of the agency, and I was never able to represent them. This was kind of a sub salento agreement with county council by the name of John Heinrich, who let me go ahead with these formations of these agencies and then continue to represent them. He actually, being county council, should be representing all county agencies, but he was a little slow sometimes in getting his opinions out, and the agencies were willing to hire me, and John, always being short of staff, was happy to have me take over the management of independent agencies. So it was kind of a silent agreement that John and I had about who was going to do what in representing agencies.
So, in concluding our interview, there's going to be a lot of young people viewing this video. People that are considering our profession, Recreation Parks and Leisure Services. And what might you say to a young person entering or considering our profession today?
Yeah, it's such a positive profession. I have just so enjoyed being around recreation and park people. They are happy people, positive people, like people, they like people, love to serve people. It's just a wonderful way to live your life, it seems to be. It has been a very happy association for me with recreation and park people. I encourage it.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, thank you for allowing us to come into your home. We've really enjoyed it. And I should mention that today is Monday, February the 8th, 2016. That's an important date to conclude our interview with. And thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. I've enjoyed it.